Everyone at Westfield High knew three things. The sky was blue, WAEC was a scam, and Zara, Daniela, and Miriam came as a package deal. You invited one, you got three. You offended one, you had three enemies. Simple mathematics. They'd met in GSS 1 when Miriam accidentally sat on Zara's lunch. Zara screamed loud enough to disturb a physics class 2 floors up, and Daniela laughed so hard she fell off her own chair. By the end of that afternoon, they were sharing gala and a bottle of La Casera like they'd known each other since the womb. Now, 10 years later, fresh out of university with degrees and delusion in equal measure, they were sharing a 3-bedroom flat in Lekki. The kind that looked expensive from the gate but had a kitchen tap that only worked when it felt like it. Lagos will humble you, Daniela's mother had warned her at graduation. Daniela smiled politely. She had her girls. How humbled could she get? The thing about Daniela was that nobody could fully explain it. She wasn't doing anything. She'd just be standing there, waiting for an Uber, eating suya at the roadside, arguing with a bus conductor, and men would simply malfunction. Eyes would glaze, sentences would die mid-air. One man had once walked into a pole on Lagos Island because he turned to look at her for too long. It's a gift, Miriam would say, munching chin-chin without looking up from her phone. It's a curse, Zara would say, watching another man trip over himself in Daniela's direction. It's a Tuesday, Daniela would say, completely unbothered. She had this way of existing that felt effortless. Long, dark hair always pulled up in a high ponytail, gold ornaments glinting at the temples and the nape of her neck, like she'd been assembled by someone who really cared about the details. She didn't try, that was the maddening part. Zara, for her part, had ginger-tinted hair that she'd spent real money on, and she knew she was fine. She knew. But somehow, standing next to Daniela had a way of making even Zara feel like a supporting character in someone else's film. She never said this out loud, of course. They were best friends. The party was in Victoria Island, one of those rooftop affairs where the drinks were free but the conversations were expensive. A mutual friend had added them to a WhatsApp group with the invite, and they'd spent 3 days planning outfits. "We look amazing," Miriam announced, burgundy hair cascading over her shoulders as they stepped out of the boat. "We really do," Zara agreed. Daniela just smiled and fixed her ponytail. They were inside for approximately 45 minutes before a man approached their corner. He was tall, wore a white agbada over black trousers, and had the kind of beard that required a dedicated skincare routine. He looked at all three. He settled on Daniela. "Forgive the interruption," he said, pulling out a small card. "My name is Tunde. I paint." "We can see you're about to," Zara muttered under her breath. Miriam disguised a laugh as a cough. Tunde was undeterred. "I don't say this to flatter you," he told Daniela, in the manner of someone who was absolutely saying it to flatter her. "But there is something in your face that I want to put on canvas before I forget what it looks like." Daniela blinked. "You want to paint my face?" "I want to immortalize it." A pause. "Okay," said Daniela. Zara's smile stayed perfectly in place. Only Miriam, who had known her since they were sharing La Casera at 14, noticed the tiny muscle that twitched near her left eye. Tunde the painter introduced Daniela to Emeka the photographer, who introduced her to Rotimi the creative director, who introduced her to what felt like half of Lagos's art scene. In the span of 6 weeks, Daniela had done 2 photo shoots, attended 4 gallery openings, and been offered a 3rd shoot that would actually pay her. "My face is working harder than my degree," she told the girls of her jollof one evening. "At least one of you is employed," Miriam said. Zara laughed. It was a real laugh. It came from the right place. She was happy for Daniela. She was happy for Daniela. She was mostly happy for Daniela. She was trying to be happy for Daniela. Then came Dare. Dare Adeyemi arrived into Daniela's life like hurricanes, quietly and then all at once. He was older, somewhere in his early 40s, with the specific energy of a man who had not checked a price tag in years because it had simply stopped being relevant information. He drove himself. That was the first thing Zara noticed. No driver. A man that rich driving himself meant he wanted privacy. It meant there were things he preferred nobody else to witness. He was witnessing Daniela. Within 2 months, he was sending her home in his car. Within 3, the car was technically hers. Within 4, the shopping bags started appearing. Real shopping bags, the kind with rope handles and tissue paper inside, and names on the outside that Zara had only seen in airports and in the backgrounds of Instagram photos. Daniela, to her credit, always shared. She's come through the door and immediately started pulling things out. This reminded me of you, I got your size, I know you like this color. And it was generous, it was genuinely generous. Zara knew this. But one evening, after Daniela had left for dinner with Dari, Zara sat on the couch with a gift bag in her lap. A beautiful thing, honestly, a silk scarf in exactly her color, and she stared at it for a long time. "She's changing," she said. Miriam looked up from her phone. "Huh?"
Daniela. Zara's voice was very even, very calm, the kind of calm that requires effort. "She's starting to perform, like she's better than us now. All this," she gestured at the bag, "it's to show off. It's not from love. She wants us to know the difference between her life and ours." Miriam was quiet for a moment. "Zara, she literally bought you the exact scarf you pointed at in a magazine 3 weeks ago. That's not the point." "Then what is?" Zara looked at the scarf, at the bag, at the careful tissue paper, at the thoughtfulness of it all that she was in this moment determined to read as condescension. "It should be me," she said softly. "It really should be me." Miriam said nothing. She really should have said something. The dump site on the outskirts of Lagos was not a place people went voluntarily. It smelled of rot and regret and the specific hopelessness of things that had been used up and discarded. Stray dogs moved through it like they owned the place, which in every way that mattered, they did. The sky above it was always a shade grayer than everywhere else, as if even the clouds preferred to keep their distance. Nobody came here unless they had something to throw away. On a Thursday evening in October, Zara and Miriam came with something to throw away. Her name was Daniela. It had been Zara's idea, the way most terrible things in history had been someone's idea, arrived at gradually, dressed up in justification, fed slowly to another person until it felt logical. It started as venting. Zara talking to Miriam in their shared bathroom at midnight, voice low, eyes bright with something that wasn't quite grief and wasn't quite anger, but lived in the neighborhood of both. It became planning somewhere around week 3, though neither of them named it that. They called it handling the situation. They called it enough is enough. They called it many things that were not its real name. The acid had been Miriam's contribution. She'd gone quiet and practical about it, in a way that should have frightened Zara, but instead made her feel like they were finally speaking the same language. They told Daniela they were taking her to see a property. A friend of a friend was selling a place cheaply and they wanted her opinion. Daniela, who had always been the most trusting of the three, who had loved these women since she was 16 years old and sharing La Casera and laughing until her sides hurt, had climbed into the car without a second thought. She'd even brought them chin-chin for the road. They drove in near silence. Zara kept both hands on the wheel. Miriam sat in the back with Daniela, chatting about nothing. A series on Netflix, a mutual friend's dramatic breakup, the price of tomatoes since last month. Ordinary conversation, the kind you have with people you love. Daniela was mid-sentence about the Netflix series when they pulled off the main road. "This doesn't look like," she started. "Shortcut," Zara said. The dump site appeared around a bend. The car stopped. The 2 doors opened. Daniela stepped out slowly, looking around, something shifting behind her eyes, the first cold finger of understanding running down the back of her neck. "Zara," she said carefully, "what is this place?" Zara turned to face her. And what chilled Daniela, what she would remember long after everything else had blurred, was that Zara was smiling. Not the performative smile she'd been wearing for months, a real one. Relaxed, almost relieved. "You know," Zara said conversationally, as if they were still in the kitchen discussing Netflix, "I always liked you, Daniela. I want you to know that. At the beginning, I genuinely liked you. Zara. But it was supposed to be me." The smile stayed. "The artist, the photographer, Dari, all of it. Do you know how it feels to stand next to someone your whole life and watch everything fall into their lap? Everything you deserved, everything you worked for, just landing on someone who doesn't even notice it's happening?" Daniela took a step back. Miriam was already behind her. I notice, Daniela's voice breaking slightly. Zara, I notice everything. I see you. I always... She didn't finish the sentence. Miriam moved first. The sound Daniela made was something that does not belong in writing. She went down immediately, her hand flying to her face, the agony so complete and total that for a moment her body simply didn't know what to do with it and chose the floor. The smell hit the air, acrid, chemical, terrible. Her ponytail came loose, her gold hair ornaments scattered across the dirt like coins dropped carelessly. Zara and Miriam stood over her. No one, Zara said, her voice strange and distant now, almost dreamy. No one is ever going to look at you the way they used to. No artist, no photographer, no diary. Miriam laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, and the moment it left her mouth, she seemed slightly startled by it herself, as if she hadn't expected to find it funny and wasn't sure what that meant about her. Daniela was beyond responding. She was beyond most things. They left her there, walked back to the car. Zara turned the radio on for the drive home, a Fuji station, because she always found Fuji calming, and they did not speak for 17 minutes. What they did not see, because people in the middle of doing monstrous things rarely notice their surroundings, was the man. He'd been there when they arrived, tucked into the far side of the dump site, partially obscured by a rusted metal sheet, sitting very still on an overturned bucket, in the manner of someone who had learned long ago to be invisible in a place. He was maybe 45, broad-shouldered, wearing clothes that were clean but simple, the kind of clean that comes from deliberate care rather than abundance. He had a face that had seen a lot of things and processed it privately. His name was Emeka Okafor, though that information was not yet relevant to Daniela, who was currently on the ground. He watched the car until its taillights disappeared around the bend. Then he sat for another moment with the stillness of a man who was deciding something. He stood, he walked over, he crouched beside her. Hey, he said, quietly, no panic in his voice. Controlled, deliberate calm, the voice of someone who had learned that panic helps nobody. Daniela flinched away. I'm not going to hurt you. I watched what happened. I should have come sooner. I'm sorry. I didn't understand what was happening until... He stopped himself. It doesn't matter. We need to move you. Can you hear me? A sound from Daniela, something between a yes and a moon. Good. Okay, I've got you. In the car, his car, unremarkable and dust-covered, not the kind of car that attracted attention, he made 2 phone calls. The first was to a doctor whose number he had saved under simply Doc, which suggested a relationship of some history. The second was to someone he called only Kolade, a short, clipped conversation in which he said very little and the other person seemed to understand everything. Daniela drifted in and out of consciousness in the back seat, wrapped in a dashiki he had produced from the boot of the car. Why were you there? She managed at one point. It came out slurred and ruined, but the question was coherent. He was quiet for a moment. I grew up near there, he said finally. That area, before all the rubbish accumulated, before everything, that was my neighborhood. My mother's house was on that road. A pause. Sometimes I go back. I don't fully know why. Something about needing to remember where you started. Daniela said nothing. My name is Emeka, he said. She didn't offer hers. He didn't ask. 3 months after the dump site, Emeka sat across from Daniela at a table in his Ikoyi home and laid out what he was proposing with the directness of a man who had spent a career in negotiations. There was a surgeon in Switzerland, one of the best in the world as it happens, a woman who had trained in Paris and Saw, and whose work was known in very specific circles for both excellent and untraceable. The kind of transformation she performed wasn't the dramatic televised variety. It was precise, architectural. She didn't change faces so much as she rebuilt them. New bone structure, new nose, new jaw, all of it healing into a face that looked completely natural because it was done by someone who understood faces as a form. It will take time, Emeka said. Surgeries don't happen all at once. Recovery, healing, procedures spaced over months. While you're there, you will have everything you need. He paused. I'm not asking for anything in return. I want to be clear about that. Daniela looked at him. But, Emeka continued in a measured tone of a man choosing words carefully, I would like, if you are willing, to continue knowing you after.
I find, Emeka said, that I've gotten used to your company surprisingly quickly. Daniela was quiet for a very long time. Then, my name is Daniela. I know, he said. I found out. I hope you don't mind. And you still want to? Yes. She looked at her hands, at the table, at the window, at him. You said your mother's house was near the dump site, she said. How did you get from there to... She gestured vaguely at the house, at everything. The corner of his mouth moved. Very slowly, he said, and then very fast. 2 years is both a long time and nothing at all. It is long enough to learn a new language, which Daniela did, French, moderately, enough to navigate Geneva with confidence, long enough to develop new habits, a new laugh, a new way of walking that came partly from the healing and partly from simply becoming, in the absence of everyone who had known the old her, someone slightly different. It was long enough to fall in love, which she did, carefully, incrementally, with the thoroughness of a woman who had learned that trust was a resource you spent wisely. Emeka visited often. They talked on the phone every evening. He sent her things, not expensive things mostly, but specific things. A book she'd mentioned once and then forgotten mentioning, a particular brand of chin-chin that somehow made it to Geneva, a recording of a Fuji track she'd said reminded her of her father. He proposed in Zurich at a restaurant that was not especially fancy over a meal that was not especially romantic. He said he didn't think she needed the production. She said she didn't. She said yes. She came back to Nigeria as Adaize Okafor. New name, new face, new country, new life. Long dark hair still. She had held on to that. Still in a high ponytail, still with gold ornaments at the temples, because some things you carry through every version of yourself. But the face beneath it was different, unfamiliar, beautiful in a new way, a quiet, precise beauty, with a jaw that sat differently, and eyes that seemed slightly further apart, and a nose that Daniela had chosen herself from a set of photographs, which was one of the stranger experiences of her life. She was 31 years old. She was Adaize Okafor. She had made peace, privately and imperfectly, with being Daniela, for only the people who had deserved her. There were not many of those left. She did not know that Zara had spent 6 months after the dump site constructing a very effective performance of grief. She did not know about the Instagram posts, soft lighting, shaking voice, my best friend is gone and I don't know what happened to her. If anyone has seen her, please. She did not know about the WhatsApp groups, the missing person flyers Zara had printed and strategically posted in places she knew would generate sympathy without generating actual police investigation. She did not know about the interview Zara had given a lifestyle blog about loss and friendship and learning to keep living. She did not know that the grief performance had attracted, among other things, a man named Binga Adisa, 48, twice divorced, soft-hearted in the specific way of men who had been disappointed often and therefore susceptible to displayed vulnerability, who had slid into Zara's DMs with condolences and stayed for considerably more. She did not know any of this. She was in Geneva, choosing a nose. What she did know on the evening of the welcome party, Emeka's idea, let me introduce my wife to everyone properly. You've been in my life for 2 years and nobody has met you, Ada. Let me do this right. Was that Lagos in the rainy season smelled like her childhood, and she had missed it more than she'd expected. She stood on the balcony of their Banana Island home and looked out at the water and thought about nothing in particular. Emeka appeared beside her. Are you ready? She turned to look at him, the ponytail, the gold ornaments, the new face that had become simply her face. Benga is coming tonight, he mentioned. Old business contact, good man. He's bringing his girlfriend apparently, recent thing. I haven't met her. What's her name? Zara something, he said, and turned back toward the house. Come on, the caterers are asking about the jollof situation. Daniela stood very still on the balcony for exactly 4 seconds. Then she straightened her ponytail, fixed one of her gold ornaments, and followed her husband inside. The welcome party was, by all objective measures, a triumph.
The Okafor residents on Banana Island did not host events so much as curate experiences. That was the phrase the event planner had used, and Emeka looked at her with the specific blankness of a man who had grown up eating eba off a shared plate and was not emotionally available for that sentence. But the result was undeniable. The house glowed from within, the catering was extraordinary, the music was the kind of Afrobeats that made your body move before your brain gave permission, and the guest list was a cross-section of Lagos money, so dense it was practically geological. Adaeze Okafor, formerly Daniela, formerly nothing, currently the most composed woman in any room she entered, moved through it all with a grace that came not from training, but from having been in a previous life fundamentally remade. When you had survived what she had survived and come out the other side with a new face and a full heart and a husband who drove an unremarkable dusty car to a dump site and decided you were worth something, small talk on a party was genuinely not difficult. She laughed easily, she remembered names, she asked questions people actually wanted to answer. She was having, by all appearances, a wonderful evening. She was also watching the door. They arrived at 9:47 p.m. Zara came in first, as she always did. It was a personality treat, in a floor-length emerald dress that she had clearly spent real time selecting. The ginger hair was down tonight, freshly done, cascading to her shoulders in a way that had required professional assistance. She was holding Binga's arm with the comfortable ownership of a woman who had decided this situation was working for her and intended to keep it that way. Miriam was behind them, slightly, in burgundy, always burgundy. The girl had committed to a brand, looking around the room with the wide eyes of someone calibrating how wealthy everyone was and what that might mean for her personally. Adaeze watched them from across the room. Her heart did something complicated. Not the hammering she'd braced for, not the cold collapse of terror she had rehearsed surviving in the mirror. Something quieter and more complete. A closing. A lock turning in a door. She picked up a glass of Chapman from a passing tray, took one measured sip, and walked over. "You must be Igbenga," she said warmly, extending her hand. "My husband has told me good things." Benga, who had a kind face and the slightly dazed expression of a man who could not entirely believe his luck at recent life events, shook it enthusiastically. "Mrs. Okafor, wonderful party, wonderful. Emeka is a lucky man." "I'll tell him you said so." She turned to the women. "And you are?" Zara smiled the smile of someone entering a social situation they intended to win. "Zara Adisa, Benga's girlfriend." She glanced around the room. "What a home. You have incredible taste." "Thank you," Adaeze smiled back with equal warmth and absolutely no other information. "And you?" she asked Miriam. "Miriam, I'm with Zara." Miriam was already looking past her at the catering table. Is that puff-puff? Sorry, is that puff-puff because I was told there would be small chops and I've been thinking about it since." "Please help yourself," Adaeze said. "There's plenty." Miriam was gone before the sentence finished. Zara watched her go with the expression of someone accustomed to this behavior. "Sorry about her. She has a relationship with Puff-Puff that I don't fully understand." Turning back to Adaeze, she said, "You have a beautiful home. How long have you been in Lagos?" "Not long," Adaeze said pleasantly. "I've been abroad for a while. It's good to be back." "Where abroad?" "Switzerland, mostly." Zara nodded with the enthusiasm of someone who had never been to Switzerland but wanted it known that she could. "Gorgeous. I keep telling Benga we need to travel more." She paused, tilting her head slightly, a small line appearing between her brows. "You know, you have a very interesting voice. It's familiar somehow." "People say that," Adaeze said. "No, I mean specifically familiar, like I've heard it somewhere before." Zara laughed lightly. "Forgive me, I'm one of those annoying people who can't let go of a thought. Have we met before? Some event maybe?" "Lagos is a big city, but a small world. Who knows?" Zara looked at her for one more beat, the small line still there, then smiled and let it go. Adaeze smiled back. Not yet, she thought. Over the following weeks, Zara and Miriam became, somehow, fixtures. This was Lagos in action. the way social circles contracted and expanded without warning, the way one introduction at one party could result in a WhatsApp group, and then regular visits, and then suddenly people were comfortable enough to raid your kitchen. Benga and Emeka began discussing business, which meant Zara came along, which meant Miriam followed Zara like a well-dressed shadow. Adaize welcomed them each time with perfect hospitality and the private amusement of a woman watching a play she had already read to the end.
She learned things. She learned that Zara had rewritten their shared history into a tragic narrative in which she was the devastated survival, the loyal friend left behind, the one who had kept searching long after everyone else gave up hope. She told this story at dinner once, unprompted, with just enough chin trembling that Brenda reached over and covered her hand. Adaize kept her face very still and passed the fried plantain. She learned that Miriam had moved on from the whole business with the remarkable emotional efficiency of someone who had convinced themselves it hadn't really happened, or if it had, it hadn't been that serious, or if it had been serious, it wasn't really their fault, or, well, the mental gymnastics of a guilty conscience was something to behold. She learned that Zara had noticed Emeka. This was not subtle. Zara was many things, calculating, convincing, committed to the performance, but subtle had never been in the toolkit. She laughed too long at Emeka's jokes, she asked his opinions on things she clearly already had opinions on, she found reasons to stand near him at gatherings, she deployed the ginger hair strategically. Emeka, for his part, was polite and slightly confused. He mentioned to Adaize one evening after the guests had left that Benga's girlfriend seemed... He paused, searching for the diplomatic word. Enthusiastic? Adaize offered. I was going to say persistent, he said, but yes. She's looking for something, Adaize said and changed the subject. The revelation came on a Sunday. Adaize had planned it, not obsessively. She was not an obsessive person. It was one of the things the past 2 years had settled in her, but deliberately, with the calm architecture of someone who believed that the right moment was worth constructing. She'd invited them for afternoon small chops and drinks, just the women, Zara, Miriam, and herself. She said she wanted a girls' afternoon. Zara said she'd been hoping for this. Miriam asked if there would be puff-puff. There was puff-puff. They sat in the living room, airy, beautiful, the water visible through the full-length windows, and they talked and laughed and ate. Zara had a second glass of wine and became expansive in that way she always did, filling the room with her voice, telling stories, center stage and comfortable there. She waited. She was thinking about a Thursday in October 2 years ago, about the smell of the dump site, about Zara's smile, that terrible relaxed smile, about the sound of her own voice cutting off mid-sentence and the long darkness afterward. She was thinking about an overturned bucket and a man sitting still and deciding something. She was thinking about Geneva and a woman with skilled hands and photographs spread across a table and the strange intimacy of choosing the face you'd live in for the rest of your life. She was thinking, I chose this face. I chose this life. I chose what happens next. Can I show you something? She said, standing. The other two looked up, Zara with wine-warmed curiosity, Miriam mid-puff-puff. Adaize left the room. She returned with a small framed photograph. She held it out to Zara. Zara took it, looked at it. It was an old photo, secondary school era, 3 girls, uniforms, enormous grains, a bottle of Lacasera visible in the corner of the frame. In the center, a girl with a high, dark ponytail and gold ornaments in her hair, laughing so hard she was slightly blurred by the movement. Zara's wine warmth dissolved. Where did you... she started. Look at the girl in the middle, Adaize said, gently. Look at her carefully. Zara looked. Her face did several things in quick succession. Recognition, confusion, a beginning of something cold. Her name was Daniela, Adaize said. Her voice was perfectly even. Daniela Eze. She had a ponytail. She had these gold ornaments in her hair. She reached up and touched one of her own, the exact same style, the details she had carried through surgeries and countries and 2 full years of being someone else, because some things you carry through every version of yourself. And she loved 2 people in this world with everything she had, from the time she was 16 years old. The room had gone very quiet. That voice, Zara whispered. I knew that voice. I knew. You did, Adaeze agreed. You've known it for 15 years. Miriam had put down the puff-puff. This was the most alarming sign that something serious was happening. They continued, sitting back down, crossing her legs, completely calm. The face, the name, the country, but the voice, she smelled slightly. I was told I could modify that too. I chose not to. I thought it was only fair to leave you something to recognize me by when the time came. Zara's mouth opened, closed. How? Miriam managed. We left you. Yes, Adaeze said simply. You did. What happened next would later be described by Benga in a statement to the police as the most alarming thing he had ever witnessed at a Sunday afternoon gathering, which was saying something, given that he had once attended a board meeting that ended in a fistfight. Zara broke first, not into remorse, but into strategy, because Zara in crisis had one mode and it was maneuver. She stood up, wine glass still in hand, and said in a fast, tight voice that none of this could be proven, that Zara had disappeared and there was no body found and no case was ever opened and she had nothing to do with it and she didn't know what this woman was implying, but she would be speaking to a lawyer. Zara, Miriam said. And furthermore, Emeka should know that his wife is clearly unstable. This is not a normal person. Who does this? Who invites someone into their home? And then, Zara. Something in Miriam's voice stopped her. Zara turned. Miriam was looking at her with the expression of someone who had been carrying something heavy for 2 years and in this exact moment decided to put it down. I'm tired, Miriam said. Zara, don't. I'm so tired, Zara. Her voice was remarkably steady for someone who had gone a distinct shade of grey. I think about it every day. Every single day, she looked at Adaeze. I think about the sound she made and I can't keep. She pressed her lips together. I'm sorry, she said to Adaeze. I'm sorry. I know that means nothing. I know, but I am. Silence. Zara stared at her. You're really going to? I got the acid, Zara. Miriam's voice cracked on the last word. I have been living with that for 2 years. I cannot keep doing this. In the silence that followed, several things happened more or less simultaneously. Adaeze sent a text message from her phone. Emeka, who had been in his study and had been waiting for this text since Sunday morning when his wife told him quietly over breakfast that she had something to handle today and she would explain everything afterward, made a phone call. Zara looked between Miriam and Adaeze with the expression of someone watching an exit seal itself shut and understanding for the first time that there was no maneuver left. You planned all of this, Zara said to Adaeze. Not quite an accusation, almost impressed in the hollowed-out way of someone who respected architecture even when it was the walls closing in on them. I had 2 years in Geneva, Adaeze said. The recovery gave me a lot of time to think.
Well, as always, before the story ends, do tell me where you are watching from. I love to see how far these amazing stories travel. Enjoy. The police arrived with a quietness that felt disproportionate to the situation. 2 officers, plain clothes, unhurried. Emeka had connections, the specifics of which Adaeze had never required explained to her. The result was that the thing was handled with a minimum of scene. Zara did not go quietly. She cried. Real tears this time, which was almost interesting, the way genuine emotion arrived only once performance became pointless. She said it wasn't supposed to go that far. She said she hadn't meant. She said Daniela would understand if Daniela knew the pressure she'd been under, the frustration, the years of standing in that shadow. I do understand the pressure, Adaeze said. She was standing by the window now, the water behind her, the late afternoon light doing something beautiful on the surface of the lagoon. I understood it then, too. That's what I've had to make peace with, that I knew you. I knew who you were, and I loved you anyway, and I didn't see it coming. A pause. That part took a while. Zara, being led toward the door, looked back at her. Your face, she said. It was almost a whisper. You look so different. I know, Adaeze said. But you're still you. How are you still you? Adaeze looked at her for a moment, at the ginger hair and the emerald dress and the ruins of the performance, at 15 years of friendship that had contained real laughter and real lacasera, and then at the end a dump site and a container of acid and a woman walking away with the car radio on. Because what they burned, she said quietly, wasn't the part that mattered. The door closed. Adeze stood in the silence of her living room and looked at the photograph still on the table. 3 girls, enormous grins, a bottle of lacacera visible at the edge of frame. She heard Emeka's footsteps on the stairs. He appeared in the doorway, reading her face the way he'd learned to read it over 2 years of careful attention. The face that was new, the eyes that were not. "How are you?" he asked. She thought about it genuinely, about Geneva and the surgeon's steady hands, about an overturned bucket and a man deciding something in the half-dark, about chin-chin on a car journey and gold ornaments scattered across dirt and a ponytail she'd never stopped wearing, about the part of you that survives every version of yourself. "Hungry," she said finally. "Is there any puff-puff left?" Emeka looked at her for a bit. Then he laughed. That quiet, full laugh that she had fallen in love with somewhere between Zurich and returning home, and went to check. Zara Adisa and Miriam Okonkwo were charged with grievous bodily harm and attempted murder. The trial, which lasted several months, attracted considerable social media attention, primarily because Zara insisted on wearing coordinated outfits to every court date, which the internet found both baffling and deeply on brand. Benga Adisa, upon learning the full story, sat quietly for a long time and then sent Emeka for a very long voice note. They remained business partners. Some bonds survive the strangest things.
Well, that's the end of this story. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you always find genuine friends. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because these amazing stories deserve to be shared. See you on the next one.